Learning skills that a lot of people don't know are a huge benefit for any farmer homestead. Hey y'all, welcome to Stivers Homestead. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jen.
And today we are learning how to make wine. Woo! That's right, that's really exciting stuff. So Tyler and Melissa from Granite Gardens are still here. And he brought her, it was like a joint birthday present on how to make
present ever.
Right. All the stuff we need and how to make homemade blackberry wine. Yep. And that's what we're gonna do today. Yeah. All right, my man. So what are we doing?
All right, so this is all the stuff you pretty much need. We've got our primary fermentation buckets. We've got our secondary fermentation.
How big is that?
This is a 6-gallon.
Okay.
So anytime you make wine, beer, or anything like that, you need headspace. So you're only making 5 gallons at a time, but you're leaving a gallon of headspace. Because like I told you, sometimes fermentation can get really active.
Right.
And then,
we don't want to know
wet, sticky ceiling and floor.
Right.
Got an airlock just for the bucket, the primary this time. I also got you 4 more, so 5 in total. So if you ever move down into the 1 gallons, if you store it all, you can actually bulk age it in this for however long, 6 months to a year if you want, or you can separate them. But I mainly brought you the 5 in case you guys start making single batches of like a base wine and then you want to flavor it separately. You can do it in the 5 gallons too. Cool.
Okay.
The first step is just to fill this up with water, and you want a sanitizing agent. So I always use the Star San. I got you guys the low foam because the high foam stuff is ridiculous. It dries in about 1 million hours. So we're gonna speed it up with this. So hot to warm water, and then whatever the instructions say for 5 gallons, I think it's a couple ounces per gallon. So we'll go ahead and measure this out, add it in, and then wait.
Okay. Stirring thing?
Not wood.
Not wood.
Not wood.
Not this guy.
How about that?
No worries.
Stay still.
Do we still have from my mom?
No, somebody sent it to me.
So first step, we've got our sanitizer and our warm to hot water, and we're gonna let this sit. Our stirring utensil, just because all we're gonna be doing when we're brewing the first part is just gonna be adding our base and our water, and that's it. So all you really need is a stir, and then you need all your pieces. Yeah, because it's gonna get sanitized in there. So then we also have the airlock for the top of the bucket. Just drop that on in there. The rest of the airlock. Always do your lid. It's not the most important thing ever because the chances of it touching are pretty low. But if you have like a blowout, then you have the risk of infection. It's the same thing of any fermenting. Sanitization is your #1 goal in the beginning, because if you do everything right after the fact, but you didn't sanitize correctly, the whole batch could be ruined. Smells bad.
So how long do we let this sit?
1 minute, 60 seconds.
Okay.
So sanitization is complete. We've got our stir, lid, airlock, and bucket. I always do it like this just because you get to sanitize the entire bucket at once. As you move through this process and you start doing other things, it's much easier to do it this way anyways, because as you get more advanced in winemaking, you actually need a lot more utensils than a stir, an airlock, and a lid.
Right.
So like you might have a press, like a fruit press that you'll need to sanitize and all that stuff, but this is a great way. And the spout makes it perfect because if you have ever dealt with some of these sanitizers, like I said, this is the low foam, which as you can, well, you can't see, but there's no foam in here. When you get the high foam, the foam stays there, and for like hours, it won't go away. So when you do it this way, you can just take it to the sink, open the spout, let it drain out, and then you're not only finishing your sanitization, but you're also highly sanitizing the nozzle.
Yeah, right. Good thinking.
Instead of just pouring it out.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And if you do it in the sink, your sink is sanitized.
Yeah.
It's going to take longer than a minute for that to go.
That's true, that's true. Is it a little heavy?
Yes. Nice.
So we let that drain out, and then what?
We'll let it drain out, and then we'll actually take the stir, the airlock out of there, so we don't have this like the extra stuff in there trying to dry at the same time. And then we'll just lay it out, probably right here on the counter, and just let it dry. Once it's dry, close to dry, we're good to go, and we'll start the next step.
And y'all see us then. Okay, we were gonna wait an hour. It's been several hours later. We got busy doing another project, which I don't know if you'll see before or after this one. But we were building nesting boxes, and that took a really long time. So now what do we do? Oh, here, actually, time pause.
Pause. All right, so the next step, everything's sanitized, everything's dry. We're gonna use a fruit base. This one specifically is from a brand I'm not even gonna try to pronounce. Vintners. Anyways, they have lots of flavors. I've used this 3 times now. This will be the 4th with them. So this one's blackberry, and this has all the sugar, all the fruit base, everything you need to actually make the wine in a high concentrate. So all we're gonna do is add this first, which is a gallon, and then we're gonna add as much distilled water as we need to make 5 gallons in the bucket. Add all the water till we hit 5 gallons.
Side note, don't do what we did. Make sure your valves shut off before you start putting it in there. Thankfully, that's all that happened.
So we're just gonna stir it a little bit. It's already diluted just because you can't not have all this dilute. It's black. And then for the time being, we're gonna put the lid on because we still have to pitch the yeast and everything.
We have to talk about what this is, Tyler.
All right, so we don't want to get flies in here while we're waiting because we're going to pitch the yeast next, but having this open even for a couple minutes is long enough for something to fly in there. Yep, see, there he is. Die in there and then potentially cause a hazard for everything you just made. So, this is the airlock. We're just going to add enough water to hit the line on the inside. And then put the little cap on. The cap is just to make sure bugs don't get in there. And once we pitch the yeast in usually 24 to 48 hours, you'll see the fermentation process start, which will just be bubbles coming up. You'll see this thing, instead of sitting down on the bottom, it'll actually rise to the top. And the air coming in will fill the top of this and eventually come out through the square openings in the side, and you'll see the bubbles come out from under there. Okay, so the next step is going to be actually getting the water to the right temperature so we can rehydrate the yeast. Once we do that, you'll see it kind of foam at the top. Once it does that, which usually is about 7 to 14 minutes depending on the type, which we'll take a look at. Then you just throw it in there, you give it one more last stir, and you're done. Alright, so I was wrong. This specific type, which is 71B, this same brand is the only one I really use. There's one other brand that I use just for mead, but it's very specific, so that's why I use it for this one. But because this is wine, I got this one because it's not too high in alcohol. It'll die out before it gets too high above 10. But it does say 95 to 98 degrees, not like my other one that's 109. So this right now is actually pretty hot, so we'll give it like maybe a minute and it should come down to below 100, and then we'll just add it and let it do its thing. So we've got it to about the temperature that we need. All it'll do is open it up and sprinkle it on the top.
Just real quick, because I just like time warp that. Once that yeast was up, which you all saw a time lapse of that, he just poured it in there and then stirred it up.
Yep.
Checking to see if anything's on the rim.
Yep, you just want to clean the inside of the rim as best as you can. This does not have a gasket in it. You can get ones with a gasket, but this specific type of brew bucket is actually made much more airtight, watertight than say like a 5-gallon bucket with a lid from Lowe's where they just kind of click on. I mean, you can see these things are extremely hard to get in.
I was telling him too, it seems very unique to find a 6-gallon bucket, and so that's cool too. So I can definitely see the importance of buying from someone that does this stuff.
The brew buckets usually go in 6 gallons as opposed to like your normal 5-gallon bucket because of the headspace that you need. So this is up to 5, but up to the top is 6, but you need that extra gallon of space because as this does start to ferment, you'll see a lot of bubbles start actually coming up in this section. And if you ever get into actually making wine from fruit itself, because there's so many extra sugars and so much extra nutrients and food for the yeast that's in there, you'll see a lot more fermentation on the top, to the point where you may actually get it so much filled in that it actually comes out of your airlock. It can actually blow through the airlock. So if you ever do that, what you can do instead of using this type of airlock, you'll actually just get a tube that goes through this. Then you just run the tube straight into like a mason jar or a bucket or anything with just a little bit of water, so the tube is underneath of the water.
All right, my battery died. So he just finished that up. Basically, I was telling you if you didn't have that, there's other ways that you can do this to watch. Now, this process is done, right? We are done. 100%. So what are we doing now? Now it's, how long do we sit and wait?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Generally is the good rule of thumb. As fermentation, as many people know, whether you're doing sauerkraut, peppers, whatever, wine is pretty much the same thing. Depending on the factors that you're doing, where you put it, say like you put it somewhere like 65 to 75 is what everybody usually says is a good range. Mm-hmm. Now, even your yeast can tell you that you might need more or less. There are ones that can work at lower temperatures, but they all work well between 65 and 75.
We're going to be putting it in our basement on a milk crate. And where Jed lives down there, it's AC'd in the summer and it's heated in the winter. So I think 65, 75 should be just fine.
And like if you put it somewhere a little bit warmer, the fermentation process will actually speed up a little bit.
A little quicker.
So you wouldn't be at 4 weeks because you wait to 4 weeks and you're going to consume too much sugar, and then you're going to have to what they call back sweeten.
So tell me that. So what should we be looking like if we're checking within that 4 weeks? How will we know, or when do we need to say, hey, we need to do something?
So many people who are super into making alcohol, they'll tell you that you can't base it on the airlock. Because this hasn't started yet. You can see the bubble is still sitting up at the top. But once this actually starts fermenting, which is usually between 24 and 48 hours, so it's quick, you'll actually see this move up, hit the lid, and then you'll see bubbles coming out. And you can have bubbles every few like milliseconds, or you can have it down to like every minute. So generally, one bubble within 2 to 3 minutes is when you know the fermentation has slowed down enough that you can move into the next stage.
Okay, so the secondary, we will be putting in this thing. What's this thing?
This is a 6-gallon glass carboy. So secondary is mainly for you to help start the clearing process. It'll also help you separate, because you can see the nozzle here is actually set a bit up from the bottom. That's because as the yeast starts replicating, consuming sugars, excreting both alcohol and CO2, it'll actually drop down to the bottom. The inactive stuff will sit, and then you'll actually, if you had it in glass in primary, you could actually see the bubbles coming up to the bottom, and that's the yeast releasing CO2. So secondary, you get it out, you get the majority of the yeast that was left on the bottom to stay in the bucket. That way you can transfer this to this, and then you'll again have some more dropout, but there'll be a lot less yeast in there to have to worry about. Plus, it'll start to clear, because not having all the extra yeast in there will help it actually clear in here.
Okay, and then so now once you've got it into the secondary, we have one more to go, right?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Theoretically. So it depends on what you're doing. So if you don't have another batch that you want to do after you put it into secondary, you can move it back into the bucket long enough that you can clean this again, and then you can actually take the final product and put it back in the 6-gallon and let it age there for 6 months to a year, depending on how much you want to age it. But the way I do it is I actually transfer it from the secondary vessel into smaller 1-gallon jugs, and then this is what I age it in. You can age in bottles with corks, you can age in beer bottles with caps. It doesn't matter how you age it, as long as it's in generally glass. You don't want to put anything long term in a bucket, because this is food grade, but because of what's going on, they can still say that it will extract things from no matter what plastic you put it in.
Okay, so we put it in this bad boy.
Right.
Technically, we could drink it right then, right? After so the 2 weeks goes into here, sits in here for another 2 weeks, then it goes into here.
Right.
When can we actually drink it?
So 2 weeks in primary, 2 weeks in secondary. After that 2 weeks, you can rack it into your 1 gallons, and you can drink it right then and there.
Yeah.
Immediately in 4 weeks, you're good to go.
Okay.
The thing is what you taste day one after those 4 weeks is going to be dramatically different from 6 months. And what you taste in the same gallon in a year is going to be dramatically different from 6 months and from day one.
Okay, I know that's a lot. This is actually very simple, and it's been very informative what he showed us, but there's one last step.
One last step.
All right, tell us about it.
So this last little baggie here has two things in it. One is what's called Camden tablets, which are the little pills, and then potassium metabisulfate, and these are both stabilizing agents. So the tablet is going to help stop the fermentation process. It'll stop yeast from replicating, and the actual like granular powder stuff will stop yeast from creating alcohol. It'll actually start killing off the yeast. So you'll actually add this right before you put it in any container to age it, because you're essentially stopping the fermentation process once you add this. So it will consume no more sugar and create no more alcohol, which is good because you don't want it to sit in here and continue to ferment, because whatever lid you put on may blow off. And if you have a really tight screw-on cap, you can actually crack or blow the glass. So primary, secondary, once you go to put it in these to start aging for whatever time you want, you just add all this to this, stir it up, give it a day to do its magic, and then that's it. And you can use the auto siphon to put it in, and that's the last step.
All right, so that was an incredibly cool tutorial on how to make your own homemade wine if you were interested. Now, is that a sustainability piece? No, you don't have to have alcohol of any form or fashion to survive. Now, couple things. For the non-drinkers, it's still a huge bargaining item, right? Knowing how to make your own liquor is a huge bargaining item for the fact that you may be able to trade for someone for something else. So what do I mean by that? Learning skills that a lot of people don't know are a huge benefit for any farmer homestead, because for someone that does like a little wine here and there, that is a hot commodity. They would be willing to trade high dollar items to have that luxury. It's kind of like chocolate. You know, think about if it was like the end of times and, you know, chocolate is just nowhere to be found, and somebody has that sweet tooth or craving and it's something they haven't had in years, and they came across somebody that had it. That is a high profit item. So you got to think of it in that form of fashion if you're a non-drinker. If you are a drinker, this allows you to have something in the pantry and not have to bargain for the ones that know how to make it. So either way you think about it, it's just a cool thing to know. It's a cool thing to have the knowledge of. The one thing that you never want to limit yourself on is stopping yourself from learning just because you might not like it. It's always good to have those skills because you never know when they might come in handy, and that was just loads of fun. Tyler, Melissa, this was the last video that we had from them being here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for everything that you brought to us. We greatly appreciated this. Again, like we had mentioned, was a joint birthday present to teach us because it is something that we wanted to learn. We have officially had our first burp. That happened about 36 hours after we made it. So as soon as that 36-hour mark hit, we put our 2-week timer on. So in 2 weeks, we'll move to our second ferment, which we will show you all when that time comes. But other than that, I hope you all truly enjoyed. It's a little different. It's something that you don't see most homesteaders show on YouTube, but it is a vital lesson to learn and something that's extremely important in my own opinion, whether you like to drink it or don't like to drink it. But if you all haven't subscribed, make sure to down below and do me a huge favor and go subscribe to Granny Gardens if you haven't already. I know we've pushed them a few times, so you might already be, and if so, thank you. But make sure to go give them a follow because they are awesome people and they are full of knowledge. They have more detailed videos about winemaking. Tyler makes mead, all kinds of good stuff over there on top of just gardening. So y'all, we love you. If you haven't subscribed one more time, hit that down below. Leave us a comment, leave us a like, and we'll catch you on the next one.